Welcome back to In Depth with Academia. I'm Richard Price, founder and CEO of academia.edu, and I am, as always, genuinely excited to get into the nitty-gritty of academic research with you. It's honestly one of the best parts of my day. We're going to dive deep into a recent paper by Dani Irwanto that explores a really fascinating and maybe even unexpected intersection between ancient Greek texts and the material evidence of prehistoric food provisioning. And just to keep it absolutely clear up front, I'm here to present the research neutrally, not to endorse or dispute it, just to share some ideas and maybe get you thinking. The paper tackles what you might call a really classic riddle, but basically they describe how food was provided for in Atlantis, at least as imagined within the story. Now, here's the kicker. Plato's text doesn't give us a long grocery list. It delivers what Dani Irwanto calls a provisioning complex. That's a technical way of saying a set of intertwined clues about what people ate, how they stored it, and even how they organized their year around it. So, the core question Irwanto asks is, what can these passages actually tell us, based purely on their wording, about the staple foods and their companions in Plato's Atlantis story? Why does this matter? Well, for one, it sharpens how we use ancient texts, not as, like encyclopedias of fact, but as context-rich riddles. More than that, it informs how we reconstruct the real dietary and agricultural patterns behind mythical lands, which turns out to carry some big implications for archaeology and even food studies today. All right, so what's in those Greek lines? Irwanto points out that Plato very deliberately gives us not species names, no wheat or beans or rice, but instead categories. There's a dry sort that is our sustenance. That's your staple grain, and it's defined by properties like its ability to be dried and stored, not by a particular plant. Then there's the companion class called ospria, which is Greek for pulses or legumes, paired by a verb that means used in addition. And topping it all off is a crucial mention of 2 harvests per year, one in winter by rain and one in summer by canal water. Now, where does that get us? Well, the methodology here is rigorous, almost refreshingly careful. Irwanto reads the text as, get this, a set of semiotic signals, which is to say, the words aren't just pointing to physical things like beans or rice, but to categories and relationships, kind of like labels in a filing system. The model he uses separates 3 orders, the literal meaning of the text, what that would mean to a Greek audience, and then, only last, what sorts of food systems might actually fit the description. Let's zoom in for a second, and, pardon this little tangent, but this is the stuff I just love. The notion that Plato's Egyptian priest character doesn't offer names but categories is such a classic teacher move. It's a context clue. You know, when someone can't give you the word, they give you the shell of the idea instead. That's so, I don't know, human. Anyway, what matters is that this text isn't failing to specify. It's deliberately being general, allowing Greeks of the time to map those categories onto whatever foods made sense to them. Back to the Reconstruction, Irwanto's methods carry 2 possibilities in parallel. One he calls dual basket, a cereal staple and a legume companion, working in tandem, basically a kind of, I guess, grain and beans system. The other is single umbrella, maybe just a broad, dry seed staple, where legumes are just a familiar example, not necessarily a real partner every time. Both options remain alive until actual archaeological evidence tips the scales. What does this mean for you, the listener, right? Well, I think it's a reminder that when we look at old texts or the evidence from past societies, we're not being handed definitive answers. We're being given frameworks for exploring. And crucially, things can be undecided until evidence shows up in the right context. In other words, research is about keeping multiple hypotheses open, not locking in on the first attractive answer. Oh, and here's the punchline Irwanto lands on. By considering a case in southern Kalimantan over in Indonesia, he's able to show that the pattern Plato sketches, double harvest, big canals, storage granaries, is actually kind of real in some historic and prehistoric rice-growing societies. But I stress, his paper doesn't declare Atlantis was Kalimantan. It uses the match to demonstrate what sorts of food systems the Greek text can reasonably describe. That's consilience. Different lines of evidence converging, but not pretending they're one-to-one. So, what's the upshot? If you're interested in food history, ancient texts, or the philosophy of evidence, this paper models a way, maybe the way, to avoid overreading a source. Instead, it lays out what the text can say, what material evidence can confirm, and where the text stops, invites archaeology and science to pick up the torch. That about wraps it up for today's episode. I hope you found something in this discussion to chew on, pun totally intended. I'll just repeat. My presentation is neutral. I'm not endorsing any particular historical theory, just pointing out some methods and ideas you can use to interpret ancient evidence or even your own data more thoughtfully. Remember, the truth in academia is never final. It's always being built bit by bit. Thanks for joining me today on In Depth with Academia, and until next time, keep exploring those questions.